Well, a freed Guantanamo Bay detainee traded for Sergeant Bo Bergdahl may have tried to reconnect with the Taliban. I'm talking about one of the so-called Taliban Five. You remember these images. They were, these are five former Guantanamo detainees who were released a few months ago in exchange for Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, who had been held prisoner by the Taliban, that American citizen. Now, the troublesome revelation comes as CNN had an exclusive interview with outgoing Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel. He told our Barbara Starr that he clashes and clashed sometimes with White House officials over the pace of the releases for other Guantanamo detainees. Listen.
I have made it very clear that I will not sign anything to release a detainee as long as I'm Secretary of Defense unless I am convinced that it is in the best interest of this country and the substantial mitigation of risk can be verified as closely as we can verify.
You just brought up, you said it, not everyone at the White House agrees with you.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what you mean.
Well, I think the press has been pretty clear on that, and I think
Let's hear it in your own words. Let's have you.
Well, what I've said is what I've just said. Not everyone at the White House has agreed with me.
On what part of this?
Probably on the pace of releases.
Because you've been cautious?
Because I have the responsibility, and I play my own game here, and that is because by law I am the one official in government charged with certification of release of detainees. I take that responsibility very seriously.
Let me bring in Republican Congressman Ed Royce, chairman of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. Thanks for being here, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bobby.
Just your reaction to what Chuck Hagel had to say there.
Well, I think this is very unfortunate. As Secretary Hagel said, he has the responsibility. He's trying to protect U.S. servicemen. We know that 30% of those who have been released so far have ended up back on the battlefield. And, of course, targets are Americans. And so this is a case where the Defense Department is pushing back. The Pentagon is saying, no, this is very risky. But the White House wants to close Guantanamo Bay, of course. And to do that, they've got to transfer those prisoners out of there, and they're doing it without an end to hostilities.
So it's important to tell our viewers that number you're talking about, it's from this September semi-annual report from the Director of National Intelligence, which did indeed find 17% of the 620 Guantanamo Bay detainees released have returned to militant activity in some way, 12% suspected at least of doing so.
No. Let me correct you, Bobby.
That is what the report says.
Yes, but the 12% are single source, evidence from a single source that they've returned to hostilities, and the remainder are from multiple sources. So they have returned. It's about 30% that have returned to.
Right, and either way you cut it, it is an astonishing number. Let me ask you this. You have said that the exchange of 5 Taliban members from Gitmo for Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, you've called it a lousy deal. But here's the thing. What would you do instead?
Poppy, first of all, I think to negotiate directly with terrorists, that's something that the United Kingdom and the United States has tried to avoid. In a case like this, where the Taliban is still waging war, I think you have to continue to hold them. And think for a minute about who we released here. You know, this is the defense minister, Fazal. This was the commandant, Nori. These individuals were responsible for the single worst atrocity against civilians in Afghanistan. 5,000 minorities slaughtered, women raped and sold into slavery. To put these men into custody in Qatar, where they're only going to be under observation for a year, is to risk the fact that after that year is over, most, I believe, will return to the battlefield and will continue to target Americans. It is not a good precedent to set.
So what, because when you also look at this report from September, it also says that the majority of those released that did return to militant activity were released under the Bush administration. So this has happened in the previous administration as well. The question is, what do you do then? Do you not close Guantanamo Bay? Do you keep them there? Because you're really saying, what other government can we trust?
But we're looking now at those at highest risk The 5 that we've mentioned here, yes, they're part of the Taliban, but 3 of them had very close ties to Al-Qaeda. So we're now at high risk. My argument is against releasing those who are high risk, because they're not only the most likely to come back into the fight, but they're the most capable, once they're back into battle, to be able to inflict major damage on U.S. forces or on our allies. And that's why I call into question this strategy. And I think you can already see by the conundrum that it's put the Jordanians in, that it was a bad precedent to set. And I will also say this: as long as the U.S. and the U.K. resisted compromise with terrorists or paying ransom to terrorists, we were in a strong position. We weren't like Switzerland or France, where they were trying to take our captives in order to trade them, right?
Congressman, I'm running out of time, but I just want to get this clearly. So then you're saying don't release them. Do you keep Guantanamo Bay open? Do you keep them there indefinitely? The
highest risk, I believe you should keep at Guantanamo Bay until we can resolve the struggle with the Taliban. And I would suggest that with both the Pakistani government at war with the Taliban and with the Taliban at war with us and with the Afghan government, we should not be releasing their senior leadership.
Guantanamo Bay is a reason that many of these terrorists use to wage jihad against Western nations.
I've heard the president say that. I do not believe that's the reason they wage terror against us, the fact that we hold them in captivity. I believe that they wage a terror war against us because they want to create a caliphate, you know, and want only people to believe their way, their jihadist ideology, and that's why they kill the religious minorities, and that's why they target the West.
Congressman, it's good to have you on the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Poppy.